You're not being fed to the lions on a regular basis, so that's a good thing. And you can emerge forward heroically. People don't aspire to the highest good because they're deeply ashamed of themselves and their weaknesses and their insufficiencies. If you make your life 0.1% better a week, man, in 2 or 3 years, you're in such a better place than you were that every new frontier that can be conquered is an advance forward, and there's no shortage of frontier because we're surrounded by the unknown. Anyway, so that's where you are. You're in a damaged structure. You're a damaged structure. You're in a damaged structure. At least it's got some walls. You're not being fed to the lions on a regular basis, so that's a good thing. And you can emerge forward heroically, magically, to confront the chaos that constantly threatens the structure within which you live. And you can free something as a consequence of that. You can learn something. You can strengthen yourself. That's the other thing, because the way, what you're actually made of, in many ways, that what informs you, what you're made of, is what you encounter when you voluntarily encounter the unknown. And so the more you voluntarily encounter the unknown, the more you get made of, and the more you get made of, the more there is to you, and then the more you're good at encountering the unknown and restructuring order and calling forth proper order out of the potential of being. And God, you got to think, why wouldn't you do that since you can do that? And it's an endless mystery. It's also encapsulated to some degree in the story of Adam and Eve, because what happens to Adam is when he becomes self-conscious, right? He becomes ashamed of himself and regards himself as a lowly sort of creature. And there's endless reasons why people would do that, because of course we're rife with imperfection, and so he hides from God. And I think that's actually the answer to the conundrum, which is that people don't aspire to the highest good because they're deeply ashamed of themselves and their weaknesses and their insufficiencies. And so that's not the only reason. There's the desire to avoid responsibility, and there's all the negative motivations as well, like resentment and hatred, the desire to make things worse. I don't want to give us too much of a break, but it's something like that. And one of the things I really have learned as a clinical psychologist is that you just cannot believe how powerful incremental progress is. You can do the calculations like it's like compound interest. If you make your life 0.1% better a week, man, in 2 or 3 years, you're in such a better place than you were that it isn't even like the same domain. And if you keep that up for 10 years or 20 years, especially if you're young and you start early, you start to straighten yourself out and fix the things that you can fix, you can transform your lives in ways that are completely unimaginable. And God only knows what the upper limit of that is in terms of human possibility, because we are amazing creatures when we really get our act together and stop running at 10% of our capacity. So that's what you do. You've got the fact that things aren't exactly the way they should be, at least gives you something to do, and maybe something great to do, because there's no shortage of suffering and trouble that besets the world that you could conceivably ameliorate in some way. And the utility of that and the intrinsic meaning of that is self-evident. All you really have to do is open your eyes and look at them, and then decide that you're actually going to do something about them. And you might think, what's within my scope of influence is so trivial that it's not worth doing. It's like, it won't stay trivial for long if you do it. Not at all. And I don't think it's trivial to begin with. I really don't believe that anything done right is trivial. And my experience in my life has been that anything I actually did paid off. It didn't pay off necessarily in the way that I expected it to pay off. That's a whole different story. But if it was genuine commitment to do something, even if it went sideways and the outcome was really something other than what I expected, the net consequence over time was nothing but good. So every new frontier that can be conquered is an advance forward, and there's no shortage of frontier because we're surrounded by the unknown.